kids! Welcome to Krista Paints a Masterpiece. Today's masterpiece is our very first fan request. Oh boy, I'm so excited. This has come from a very dear friend and dedicated fan of Krista Paints a Masterpiece, a Mindy Dietsch. Thank you, Mindy, for your request. I'm extremely excited to do this one. So what is it? What are we going to do? There is a small hint on my shirt. That's right, folks. We are going to do Vigo the Carpathian, the scourge of Carpathia, the sorrow of Moldavia. That's right, Vigo the Carpathian. He had a bunch of other names as well. So Vigo the Carpathian, Vigo the Cruel, Vigo the Evil, Vigo the Grumpy, Vigo the Sleepy, Vigo the Butch. Vigo is the fictional villain from the movie Ghostbusters 2. He was a painting that comes to life and possesses a very dweeby art restorer and eventually tries to possess a baby. Sorry, spoiler alert for those of you who have not watched that in the last 30 years. Let's have a look at my materials. Here's my watercolor palette. Watercolor. So with me, burnt sienna, apparel red, quinacridone gold, and ultramarine blue. Now we will be adding one additional color to this, which will be raw sienna. Why am I adding raw sienna this time, as opposed to just using the quinacridone gold for my yellows? Well, I will tell you. It's because raw sienna is a much more dirty color, and I feel like this particular painting is very dirty, which is why it needed to be restored in the first place, I suppose. This one, raw sienna, is related to a burnt sienna. Can you guess how? That's right, it's burnt. Otherwise, the rest of these colors, nah, not going to use them. Mostly have them there for show. Going to use a bit of gouache today as well. We'll definitely be using a bit of the yellow ochre again, and somewhere in here, somewhere, there's some permanent white, and I'll be using that as well. Now we always look at my brushes and I usually just call them pointy because they are so pointy. But I thought that I would mention that these are also all synthetic brushes. I don't have any natural hair fiber brushes in my kit whatsoever. Save the squirrels, man! Save those little squirrels. So all of these are synthetic hair brushes. This one, notice, is quite blue. It did not start its life blue, it started its life white. And it has become blue because it's been stained by a phthalo blue. Hopefully I will use phthalo blue at some stage in a different picture, and we can talk about the difference between staining pigments and granulating pigments. But not today. As usual, my tubes of paint. Don't eat tubes of paint. It's a really bad idea. This is a PSA brought to you by Krista. Okay, let's get started, shall we? Are you excited? Oh, I'm so excited. But are you excited? Oh, but I am. I'm so excited. Dun 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 dun. Ghostbusters. So first we're starting off with the wet in wet wash. That means putting a lot of wet pigment onto wet paper so that it moves around. It doesn't, there's no words like flow that start with a W, are there? Whoosh, whoosh, so the paint whooshes around. I'm using a lot of the raw sienna as well, because the raw sienna is very dirty kind of yellow, and this picture is quite dirty as far as the colours go. Now I have talked a lot about my pigments in the past and how I apply my pigments. but this is some very familiar techniques to those of you who have watched any previous Krista Paints and Masterpieces. You will see me doing a blending. You will see me doing a wet and wet wash. You will see me doing a wet and dry. And combinations of all of those. Also, a bit of dry brush from time to time. Once I've established all of the mid-tone areas and all of the light tone areas, I will start to come in with the dark tone areas. With this particular piece, there was quite a lot of adjusting and moving things around. Thankfully, the sizing was okay, so I could do that. But also, I felt like I was just constantly kind of fighting the tone. So, trying to make it darker, try and make it have structure. I think it was always in the back of my mind that this was a photograph, not a painting. So there was no painting techniques per se that I could be trying to imitate. Like with the Rembrandt, I was looking for something that was painterly. Or with the girl with the pearl earring, I was looking for really smooth, soft consistency. With this one, I'm trying to make it look like a photograph. I don't know why I went American there. Which is quite difficult because it's a photograph that was manipulated to look like a painting, and yet it doesn't really look like a painting. And also working from a reference that was about this big makes it quite hard as well. But as you will see, we got there. We got there in the end. There was still quite a lot of texture that needed to be put into this piece. So there was quite a lot of having to kind of scumble stuff in. Scumble, well, that's a nice word. Haven't used that word before. Scumble, to scumble. To scumble is to kind of just mush it in there. Mush it in there any way you possibly can. Usually with a mushy, messy, furry kind of brush. That's scumbling, folks. This kind of brush would be a scumbling brush. This kind of brush is a detail brush. Scumble, detail, scumble, detail, scumble, detail, scumble, detail. I did a rap. So coming in more firmly into the eye now. Get that eye tightened up a little bit more, try and get a bit more detail. Most important thing for this particular picture is also getting the structure of the face. Here's a really deep overhanging forehead. Not making any comments on his personality based on the depth of his forehead, but it's a big forehead. It's a real big overhanging forehead. And so trying to get the right amount of tone to make it feel like there's a front plane and then there's an underplane of the forehead hanging over the top like a massive bridge, and then his eyes. It's quite tricky. It's quite the challenge for this particular piece. But it's a challenge that I rose to. And it smashed! Shapow! Straight out of the park. Now, interesting factoid about this particular piece, about this particular painting. Aside from the fact that it is not a painting and never was a painting and was always just a photographic manipulation, an interesting factoid is that the actor who played Vigo, the actual actor who is in the painting, was not allowed to use his own voice in the film. He was voice acted by someone completely different. Not sure why. I don't think it was because his voice
sounded like this, and so it wasn't very threatening.
He actually had a reasonably threatening voice. By all accounts, the man himself was quite threatening. Wilhelm was his name, which was actually a theatrical name, the stage name that he came up with, because he was a pro wrestler and boxer. And apparently also just a really, really, really unkind man. No one liked working with him, no one liked him. Before he passed away, his sister-in-law kind of told him that she hated him. It's all sad business. So, perfect actor to play a complete bastard in film is someone who is a complete bastard in real life. Makes sense really, doesn't it? Face is starting to build up quite nicely now. We're starting to get some good tones happening in the bone structure. Again, thinking about these tones, thinking about the overhang of the brow. You don't want to make the overhang of the brow be meaningless. it all has to mean something. And so when you're looking at the face, you can see that this area of the face, and his face, not covered by really awesome goals, this area of his face is very light. This triangle on his cheek is also very light. These areas here in the front of the lip and the front of the chin, also very light. And that is because all of those areas relate to each other. All of those areas are on the same plane. And then the two side planes, two mid planes, two side planes, also relate to each other. The problem with this particular picture, again, I know it's a photo manipulation like I keep saying, but the other reason why it is so tricky is because there was a lot of makeup applied to his face, and so some of the structure is harder to identify. Some of the things that should have been side planes or front planes have gotten or taken on the look of the wrong kind of plane of the face. So there's a certain amount of correcting that I'm doing. There's a certain amount of making the contrast more realistic than it was, because I think quite a lot of the contrast was overemphasized to make the painting look more creepy and menacing. But I am still pumping in quite a lot of tone. Just pumping it in there. Pumping it in there. So one thing that I'm taking a lot of care to do is make sure that I don't overemphasize any creases or tones or transitions, plane transitions, that shouldn't be overemphasized. For example, there's a little crease near his eye, sort of going from his eye across to his cheek, which a lot of people have, particularly as you get older. You start to develop these sort of funny creases all over your face. Don't look too closely at my face. Please don't look too closely. But that kind of crease, it would be easy to really overemphasize that crease and make too much of it. So I have instead chosen to I have decided through the medium of cheddar to minimize that crease and just subtly imply it with a very, very small tonal shift, which is the skill of the artist. It's one of the more difficult things to do, is show restraint. I'm not very good at showing restraint. Well, that's not true. I am as an artist. I am not as a host, presenter of a show. And I'm certainly not when it comes to cheddar. Ah, I do like cheddar. Painting around the mouth is always hard. Restraining yourself, again, not great at restraining myself, but restraining yourself to make it look like it's lips and not lipstick is very hard. And it's something that a lot of people struggle with. And I tell you what the secret is. The secret is, don't let your model put on lipstick before you paint them. No, that's not it. The secret is, number one, don't make them too pink. They can be red. They can be fawn. They can be terracotta. But unless they have really, really kind of light, very pinkish skin on the rest of their face, don't make it very light, pinkish kind of lips. It just won't make sense. I'm pretty sure Vigo didn't have endless access to a bunch of chapsticks. The second thing is that you've got to make sure you don't draw a perfect line all the way around both lips. The top lip is often well defined, and it's usually darker than the bottom lip because it's an underplane. But the bottom lip, unless there's lipstick, there's no line. There's no line! There's no line from here to here. All of this is the same plane. It should be the same tone, even if it's a slightly different color. So don't draw around the lips, otherwise you'll get lipstick. So if you want lipstick, draw around the lips. It's a good tip. You should definitely be writing that one down. Pop that in your pocket. Take it home with you. Love a bit of hair texture. Ugh, doing hair texture is hard. I think I've said this before in one of my other Krista Paints and masterpieces, that the texture of hair is really hard, and the tonality of hair is really hard. And blonde hair, in particular, really hard. There's always a fine balance between painting too many hairs and then painting not enough hairs. And that's the best I can give you. Paint the right amount of hairs. That's how you paint hair. I'm also getting into painting some of the reflective metal stuff that's around his neck. And I spoke a little bit about painting reflective objects in Girl with the Pearl Earring. But for those of you who haven't watched it, you've missed out on so much wisdom. But if you haven't watched it and you'd like to know without having to go and watch it, I'm very sad. The key to painting reflective objects is the highlight is often sitting right next to or on top of a shadow. I know, mind-blowing. With non-reflective objects you get highlight, midtone, shadow. With reflective objects, often you get highlight, shadow, midtone. And this is why if you overemphasize reflected light into a face or object, then you end up with highlight, shadow, midtone, and your face looks reflective. You look like you've painted a robot. Which if you want to paint a robot, that's great. If you don't want to paint a robot, sad face. Smoothing. Smoothing paint with watercolors, when the sizing is okay, involves putting down wet on dry, so wet pigment in your brush. Brush is wet, but the paper is dry, and you put down the pigment. Just like that. And then you wash your brush, and you dry it off, and then you just move the soft edge. And that, my friend, is called dry blending. And in this particular picture you can see I am doing it all the time, pretty much non-stop. It's all dry blending. It's one of the only ways to get a very nice, smooth, and yet controlled edge. Because a wet and wet wash, very hard to control that edge. Wet on dry, hard edge. Wet on dry and then blended. That's how you get a soft, controlled edge. Now it sounds very simple. It is not simple. It's quite hard. It's a high-level, advanced technique. But when it works, it's beautiful. The results are absolutely stunning. You get lovely transitions through skin tones, from front planes to side planes, back again. Dry blending is the best. I am now going to start applying the gouache. The gouache into the hair, the gouache into the neck brace thing, the gouache into the little studs that he has all over his very, very, very manly costume. And the gouache will give me the extra highlights that I need. Some of these I actually could have painted around, if I'm honest. I was being faintly lazy by not painting around them, but hey, it's my painting. And you can do this painting, you can paint around it. But this is my painting. And I decided that I wanted to use some gouache. Who's gonna tell me no? Me in a different episode, probably. But I'm now doing that, putting in some gouache. We're coming to the final touches of this picture, folks. I'm gonna make the background nice and dark, pump in a lot more burnt sienna and raw sienna and ultramarine blue and get that bad boy real dark, and then it is going to be done. Yay! So there it is. Masterpiece recreated. In fact, elevated to the status of masterpiece, because for the first time it is actually a painting. Let's have a look at it. He's so evil. What happens if I look him in the eyes though? Oh, Vigo. Oh, Vigo. I'll just touch your face. Ah! Oh, command me, Lord. None of that's going to make sense unless you've watched the movie. If you haven't watched the movie, go watch the movie, come back for that bit. It will be 100% funnier. I swear it to you. So that's it for Vigo. Let's put him in a safe, secure box and lock it and never speak of this again and never look at him again. Quite happy with that. I would love to say thank you to everyone who has made requests so far for new masterpieces. I actually have now potentially more requests for masterpieces than actual fans, which I really appreciate. So there will be more fan requests coming up next, and I'm very excited to share more art with you. Some of them have been a bit weird. I am gonna do it though. All right, that's it for me for today, folks. Please subscribe and like and come back and see the next one and then tell me about how much you love it, because I love hearing about how you love it, and I will see you in our next episode. Bye.